For as long as humanity has asked questions, two great forces have shaped our search for truth: faith and reason. One looks beyond the material world, trusting in the unseen, the eternal, the divine. The other looks inward and outward, measuring, testing, observing the laws of nature. For some, these two paths walk hand in hand. For others, they clash at every step. From the philosophers of ancient Greece, to Galileo's telescope, to Darwin's finches, to the mysteries of modern physics, the struggle between faith and reason has shaped civilizations, inspired revolutions, and divided generations. But is this truly a battle? Or is it the story of humanity's endless quest to understand both the world and our place within it? This is the epic struggle between science and religion, a story 2,000 years in the making. Faith and reason, two of humanity's oldest companions. Faith gives meaning, belief in something greater than ourselves, guidance for right and wrong, hope in the face of uncertainty. Reason gives understanding, tools to explore the stars, uncover the secrets of life, and explain the forces of nature with clarity and proof. Together, they have built our world. Yet again and again, they have collided. In ancient times, philosophers asked whether the universe was guided by gods or by natural law. In the Middle Ages, religion preserved knowledge, even as it demanded authority over it. In the scientific revolution, reason broke free, declaring independence from faith. And in the modern age, the debate continues, in classrooms, in laboratories, in parliaments, and in hearts. Why does this struggle matter? Because it is not just about science or religion. It is about us, about how we decide what is true, what is good, and what kind of future we want to create. Over the next hour, we will trace this story. From the philosophers of ancient Greece, to the rise of Christianity, to the bold thinkers of the Enlightenment, to Darwin's challenge and to the frontiers of modern science. At every stage, faith and reason will clash, and sometimes they will find surprising harmony. Our journey begins in the ancient world, where reason first dared to question the stories of the gods. Chapter 1. Ancient Roots. Our journey begins in ancient Greece, a land of gods, temples, myths, and philosophers. Here, more than 2,000 years ago, people first began to wrestle with the tension between faith and reason, between the stories of the gods and the logic of the mind, between a world explained by myth and a world that could be explained by thought. The world of the gods. For the Greeks, every part of nature was alive with divine power. Thunder was the voice of Zeus. The sea's fury was Poseidon's wrath. Harvests belonged to Demeter, love to Aphrodite, and wisdom to Athena. Each god and goddess ruled a domain, shaping both nature and human destiny. Faith in this world meant honoring the gods with ritual and sacrifice, retelling their myths, and accepting that unseen forces ruled the fate of humanity. To anger the gods was to risk disaster. To please them was to secure favor. But even then, a radical question arose. Were the gods the only explanation for the world around us? Or could there be another way to understand the universe? The birth of philosophy. It was in Greece that philosophy, literally, the love of wisdom, was born. The early philosophers, known as the pre-Socratics, were not content with myth. Thales suggested that water, not gods, was the foundation of all things. Heraclitus believed the universe was in constant flux, ruled by an unseen principle of order. Democritus imagined the world made of invisible particles, atoms, centuries before modern science would prove him right. Then came Plato, one of the most influential thinkers in history. To him, the visible world was only a shadow of a higher reality, a realm of perfect, eternal forms. The objects we see, trees, animals, even human beings, were imperfect reflections of these higher ideals. True knowledge, Plato argued, came not from the senses, but from reason and contemplation of these eternal truths. Plato's student, Aristotle, broke from his master. For Aristotle, truth was not in some higher realm, but in the natural world itself. By studying plants, animals, the stars, and the human body, we could uncover the principles that governed reality. He dissected, classified, and reasoned systematically, laying the foundations for logic, biology, physics, and metaphysics. In Aristotle's view, reason, not myth, not ritual, was the key to knowledge. This was the first great struggle between faith and reason. The divine stories of the gods and the rational explanations of philosophy existing side by side within the same culture. The rise of Christianity. Centuries later, Christianity rose within the Roman Empire, and with it came a new dimension to the struggle. Christianity taught faith in one God, a divine creator, and a spiritual destiny for humanity. But it also inherited the intellectual tools of Greek philosophy. Early Christian thinkers such as St. Augustine sought to unite faith and reason into a single vision. Augustine argued that faith must always come first, but reason was a valuable servant. Logic and philosophy could help us understand creation, but never replace Scripture. The mind could search, but the heart must first believe. This framework became the foundation of the Western world for centuries to come. Faith as the ruler, reason as the advisor. Preserving knowledge. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed, much of Europe descended into chaos. Cities fell, libraries burned, and knowledge was at risk of vanishing forever. But in monasteries scattered across the continent, monks became guardians of learning. By candlelight, they copied Greek and Roman manuscripts, astronomy charts, medical writings, philosophical texts, preserving them for future generations. To the monks, studying nature was not rebellion against God, but an act of devotion. The more one learned about creation, the more one could glorify the Creator. But this devotion came with boundaries. Reason could explore the heavens, so long as it agreed with heaven's story. And yet, a seed of tension remained. What would happen if reason uncovered truths not found in Scripture? What if nature told a story different from faith? For centuries, the uneasy balance held, but the fracture was coming. And when it came, it would shake the world. Chapter 2. Medieval Harmony and Tensions. At the end of Chapter 1, we left the ancient world with a fragile truce. Philosophy had shown that reason could explain much about the universe, yet religion, first in Greece, then in Christianity, remained the ultimate authority. Faith ruled, reason advised, but history never stands still. As empires fell and new civilizations rose, that balance was tested again and again. Europe, after Rome. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century, Europe entered an age of turmoil. Cities shrank, trade slowed, libraries were destroyed. Much of the ancient world's knowledge seemed destined to disappear forever. And yet, light did not vanish completely. Monasteries and churches became sanctuaries of learning. Monks preserved what they could, carefully copying texts by candlelight. Plato, Aristotle, Galen, and Ptolemy survived not because reason was free, but because faith saw value in protecting the past. For a time, faith and reason walked side by side, but always, faith held the reins. The Church declared what could be read, what could be taught, and what must remain silent. Reason lived, but only inside the walls faith built around it. But how long can reason remain a servant before it demands to speak for itself? The Golden Age of Islam. While Europe struggled, another light was burning brightly in the east. In Baghdad, Cordoba, and Cairo, Muslim scholars built a civilization that treasured knowledge. At the Great House of Wisdom in Baghdad, texts from Greece, India, and Persia were gathered, translated, and expanded. Thinkers like Avicenna in medicine and Averroes in philosophy asked bold questions. Could revelation and reason be reconciled? Was the Quran in conflict with logic, or did it invite deeper inquiry? For them, science was not rebellion, but devotion. To study the stars was to uncover the order God had placed in the universe. To treat the sick was to honor the Creator who gave life. Their discoveries in mathematics, astronomy, and medicine would later cross back into Europe and spark its awakening. Without this Islamic golden age, would the West have ever had its Renaissance? The Christian synthesis. By the 12th century, a flood of translated works, Aristotle, Euclid, Galen, returned to Europe. Suddenly, the old Greek logic was alive again. Universities sprang up in Paris, Bologna, and Oxford. Scholars debated fiercely, was the reason to be trusted on its own, or must it always bow to Scripture? Thomas Aquinas, a Dominican friar, offered a daring answer: truth cannot contradict truth. If God is the author of both nature and revelation, then faith and reason, properly understood, must agree. It was an attempt at harmony. Reason was not an enemy of faith, but its ally. Natural law could reveal God's wisdom, just as Scripture revealed His will. But harmony on paper is not always harmony in practice. What would happen if reason's discoveries pointed in directions faith did not want to go? Harmony on the edge. For a while, the balance held. Astronomers charted the skies, physicians dissected bodies, philosophers debated existence. All this unfolded under the protective canopy of faith. But the canopy had limits. When reason supported Scripture, it was celebrated. When it challenged Scripture, suspicion fell quickly. The Middle Ages revealed something crucial. Faith and reason could work together, but only so long as faith remained in command. The partnership was real but fragile. And fragile partnerships eventually break. The uneasy truce of the Middle Ages would not last forever. For beyond the horizon, new instruments and new ideas were coming, ones that would push reason beyond faith's control. And when that happened, the world would never be the same. Chapter 3. The Age of Conflict. At the end of Chapter 2, we saw how faith and reason walked together, uneasily but together. The Church preserved knowledge, universities debated Aristotle, and thinkers like Aquinas tried to show that faith and reason could never truly disagree. But harmony that depends on boundaries is fragile, and by the 16th and 17th centuries, those boundaries began to crack. Reason was no longer satisfied to be faith's servant. It wanted to be its equal, perhaps even its master. What happens when reason refuses to stay in its place? History shows us conflict is inevitable. Galileo and the telescope. In 1609, Galileo Galilei pointed a new invention, the telescope, toward the sky. What he saw would change the world: mountains on the moon, moons orbiting Jupiter, the phases of Venus. Each discovery whispered the same truth. Earth was not the center of the universe. The heavens did not revolve around us. This was not just science, it was heresy. For centuries, Scripture and church teaching had placed Earth firmly at the center of creation. If Galileo was right, what else might Scripture be wrong about? In 1616, the Church condemned the heliocentric model as foolish and absurd. In 1633, Galileo was hauled before the Inquisition and forced to recant. Legend says he muttered under his breath, "And yet it moves." True or not, the phrase captured the moment. Faith had silenced reason, but the silence was temporary. The telescope could not be unseen. Could the heavens themselves testify against Scripture? Newton and the clockwork universe. Just a few decades later, reason struck again, this time with even greater force. In 1687, Isaac Newton published his Principia Mathematica. With 3 laws of motion and the theory of universal gravitation, he revealed a cosmos governed by mathematics. Apples fell, tides shifted, planets orbited, not by miracles, but by natural law. To many, this was proof of a rational creator, a divine engineer who had written the laws of the universe with mathematical precision. Newton himself believed his discoveries glorified God. But others saw something more troubling. If the universe ran like a perfect machine, ticking endlessly according to fixed laws, what need was there for God's daily intervention? Had Newton revealed the mind of God, or had he quietly pushed God aside? When the universe runs like a clock, is the clockmaker still needed? The Enlightenment, reason unleashed. By the 18th century, the spirit of reason leapt beyond the laboratory and into every corner of society. This was the Enlightenment, the age of reason. Philosophers like Voltaire, Diderot, and Rousseau attacked superstition and the authority of the church. Encyclopedias compiled knowledge not as sacred truths, but as human achievements. Politics, too, began to change. In America and France, revolutions tore down kings and questioned divine right. Democracy and human rights found their justification not in scripture, but in reason, nature, and human dignity. Deism, the belief that God was a watchmaker who created the universe and then stepped back, became fashionable among intellectuals. The world no longer needed daily miracles. It ran on its own. Religion, once supreme, now found itself on the defensive. Critics accused it of stifling progress, of chaining humanity to the past. David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, raised devastating questions. Can miracles ever be trusted when natural explanations are always more likely? And if morality is built on reason and human sympathy, what role is left for God? The Enlightenment brought extraordinary progress, modern science, political freedom, new ways of thinking. But it also deepened the divide. What had once been uneasy partners now seemed like rivals locked in a struggle for the soul of civilization. If reason can explain everything, is there anything left for faith to claim? Harmony broken. By the dawn of the 19th century, the truce was shattered. Reason had declared its independence. Faith, once the guardian of knowledge, was now seen by many as its enemy, and yet the struggle was far from over. Because the next great challenge to faith would not come from the stars above, but from life itself. A quiet English naturalist was about to write a book that would shake humanity's very sense of identity. Chapter 4. Darwin and the Human Question. At the end of the Enlightenment, reason had broken free, challenging faith in philosophy, politics, and science. But still, one great pillar of belief remained untouched, the story of humanity itself. The stars might move, the earth might not be the center, but surely humanity remained special, created in God's image, placed above all other creatures. That assumption was about to be tested. What happens when reason does not just challenge our place in the cosmos, but our very nature as human beings? The Voyage of the Beagle. In 1831, a young English naturalist named Charles Darwin boarded the HMS Beagle for a 5-year voyage around the world. At first, he was not the ship's scientist, but a companion to the captain. Yet his curiosity drove him to collect specimens, sketch landscapes, and study every creature he encountered. In South America, he found fossils of enormous extinct animals, creatures that resembled but were not identical to those still alive. Why had some species vanished while others endured? In the Galapagos Islands, he noticed that finches differed from island to island. Their beaks, shaped by food sources, were perfectly suited to their environments. Were these birds created separately, or had they adapted, changing over time? Darwin began to suspect that nature was not fixed, as Scripture taught, but fluid. Life itself might be capable of transformation. Could species, long thought to be unchanging, actually evolve? The Tree of Life. Back in England, Darwin filled notebook after notebook with questions and sketches. In one margin, he wrote 2 simple words: I think. Above them, he drew a tree with branches. It was the seed of a radical idea. All living beings, from microbes to mammals, might share a common ancestry. Life, Darwin believed, branched and diversified over vast spans of time, shaped by a process he called natural selection. The principle was simple. Those with traits better suited to survival passed them on. Those without them perished. Slowly, over millions of years, these tiny advantages accumulated into entirely new species. Darwin's idea was bold but dangerous. If humans were part of this branching tree of life, then perhaps we were not set apart. Perhaps we were not divinely placed above creation, but deeply connected to it. On the origin of species. For 2 decades, Darwin hesitated to publish. He knew his theory would ignite controversy. But in 1859, driven by both evidence and the fear of being preempted by other researchers, he finally released On the Origin of Species. The book was an immediate sensation. Scientists marveled at its clarity and evidence. To many religious leaders, it was a shock bordering on blasphemy. Genesis told of creation in days, of humans formed in God's image. Darwin described a story of slow, blind change, with humanity emerging from the same process that shaped worms and whales. If humans are not separate from animals, what becomes of the soul? The debate explodes. The year after Darwin's book, a fiery debate shook Oxford University. Bishop Samuel Wilberforce, armed with scripture, mocked Darwin's supporters, sneering about monkeys in the family tree. Thomas Huxley, nicknamed Darwin's bulldog, fired back. He would rather be descended from an ape than from a man who twisted the truth. The audience gasped, then roared. The debate symbolized more than biology. It was faith and reason, face to face, battling in public view. The Scopes monkey trial. Decades later, in 1925, the struggle crossed the Atlantic. In Tennessee, teacher John Scopes was put on trial for teaching evolution. The case became a global spectacle. The courtroom turned into a stage. Lawyers, preachers, scientists, and journalists fought over more than one man's lesson plan. The trial symbolized the deeper question: should science be free to challenge Scripture in public life, or must it remain under religion's authority? Though Scopes was convicted, the cultural impact was far greater than the verdict. Evolution was no longer just a theory, it was a battleground. Science confirms evolution. Over the next century, evidence piled higher. Fossil records showed gradual change. Genetics revealed how traits passed through generations. DNA uncovered the deep connections between all species. Evolution was no longer simply Darwin's idea. It became the foundation of modern biology. And yet, even with overwhelming evidence, the struggle did not vanish. The religious response for many believers, evolution remained a profound challenge. If humans arose from chance and struggle, what of our dignity? If we are part of the animal kingdom, what of our immortal soul? If suffering and death drive evolution, how could a loving God use such a method? Some rejected evolution outright, clinging to literal creationism. Others embraced it, seeing natural selection as the divine mechanism through which life unfolded. For both camps, the struggle was not just intellectual, it was existential. Reconciling Darwin with God meant reconciling science with the deepest human questions of meaning and purpose. Darwin's legacy. Darwin died in 1882, honored and buried in Westminster Abbey near Isaac Newton. Two men whose discoveries reshaped humanity's place in the cosmos, one in the heavens, the other in the story of life itself. Their resting place side by side symbolized something profound. The struggle between faith and reason was not about victory or defeat. It was about humanity's restless search for truth, and that search was about to widen again. For as the 20th century dawned, science turned its gaze not only to life, but to the very birth of the universe. Chapter 5. 20th Century Frontiers. Darwin had shaken faith's foundation by challenging humanity's place in nature, but the 20th century brought even greater shocks. This time, the questions reached beyond life itself. into the birth of the universe, the structure of reality, and the mystery of the human mind. The struggle between faith and reason entered entirely new frontiers. Could science now answer not only how life began, but how the universe itself came into being? The Big Bang versus Genesis. In the 1920s, a Belgian priest and physicist, Georges Lemaitre, proposed a daring theory. He suggested that the universe was not eternal, but had a beginning. From a single, dense, primeval atom, the cosmos exploded outward, expanding into the stars and galaxies we see today. This was the Big Bang theory. To many, it sounded astonishingly like scripture. "Let there be light," said Genesis. Now physics was saying the same. The universe itself had a moment of creation. Even Albert Einstein resisted the idea at first. He preferred a steady, eternal cosmos, free from theological echoes. But as evidence mounted, galaxies rushing apart, cosmic radiation filling the skies, the Big Bang became undeniable. When science begins to echo scripture, does it confirm faith or make it unnecessary? Fine-tuning and design. As physics advanced, another puzzle emerged. The laws of nature seemed eerily fine-tuned for life. If gravity were a little stronger, stars would collapse. If it were weaker, no stars could form at all. If the charge of the electron shifted even slightly, atoms could not exist. Again and again, the constants of the universe appeared balanced on a knife's edge. Was this a miracle? Believers pointed to God's hand in the details. Skeptics argued for the multiverse, countless universes, most lifeless, with ours as a lucky accident. So the old question returned in modern form. Is life the result of design or chance? The brain and the soul. For centuries, faith taught that humans possess an immaterial soul, something beyond the body, eternal and divine. But neuroscience began to tell another story. Scientists discovered that memory, thought, and even personality arose from brain activity. Damage the brain and the mind itself could change. This suggested the soul was not separate but deeply tied to biology. And yet even here, mystery remained. Consciousness, the fact that we feel and know, could not be explained by brain scans or neurons firing. This is the hard problem of consciousness, how physical matter produces subjective experience. If science can explain the brain but not the mind, has it truly explained the soul? Playing God, AI, and biotechnology. As the century turned, science began to enter domains once thought reserved for the divine. Biologists learned to edit DNA, the very code of life. Entire species could be altered. Genetic diseases could be corrected or enhanced traits introduced. At the same time, machines began to learn. Artificial intelligence could write, play, predict, and even create. Some warned that AI might one day rival or surpass human intelligence. For millennia, creating life and shaping minds belonged to God alone. Now humanity wielded those powers. Supporters hailed it as progress, a chance to heal disease and push evolution forward. Critics warned of hubris, of playing God with forces we did not truly understand. If humans can now create life and intelligence, what does that mean for the Creator? Dialogue and cooperation. Yet the 20th century also showed attempts at reconciliation. The Vatican, once hostile to Galileo, built observatories and employed priests as astronomers. Some scientists, like Francis Collins, leader of the Human Genome Project, openly embraced both science and Christian faith. Others, like evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould, suggested a truce. Science explains how the universe works, while religion asks why it exists. Two separate realms, both necessary. This cooperation suggested that faith and reason might not always be at war. In fact, in facing new ethical questions, climate change, biotechnology, artificial intelligence, science and religion sometimes worked side by side. Toward new frontiers. The 20th and 21st centuries revealed something profound. The struggle is not ending. Every breakthrough opens new questions. Did the universe need a beginning? Why is it so finely tuned for life? Can the brain explain the soul? Should humans play the role of creator? Science expands knowledge. Faith seeks meaning. On the frontiers of modern discovery, both continue the search for truth. And yet, even these efforts at reconciliation could not erase the tension. For as history marched forward, the struggle between faith and reason remained alive. Not just in laboratories and churches, but in classrooms, courtrooms, and cultures around the world. Chapter 6. Attempts at Reconciliation. For much of this story, faith and reason have appeared as rivals. Myth versus philosophy, scripture versus telescope, creation versus evolution. But that is not the whole story. Again and again, individuals and traditions have sought to reconcile these two great forces, not as enemies, but as partners. Could it be that the greatest human progress happens not when faith and reason fight, but when they learn to work together? The Church and the Stars. It is easy to remember the Catholic Church for silencing Galileo, but the same Church also became one of the world's patrons of astronomy. For centuries, the Vatican operated observatories. Jesuit priests charted comets, mapped the skies, and studied the planets. To them, exploring the heavens was not an act of rebellion, but of devotion. The stars, after all, were part of God's creation. Here lies a paradox. The very institution once seen as the enemy of reason also nurtured it. Echoes of the Islamic Golden Age. Centuries earlier in the Islamic world, scholars like Avicenna and Averroes had argued that reason was a gift from God. To use it was to honor him. Their writings shaped not only Islamic thought, but also Jewish and Christian philosophy. Maimonides, a Jewish philosopher in medieval Spain, likewise taught that reason and revelation, properly understood, could never contradict. The message was clear. Faith and reason need not divide civilizations. At times they could enrich one another, crossing cultural and religious boundaries. Mini-hook. What if the world's religions, instead of fighting over truth, discovered that reason itself could be their common ground? Modern scientists of faith. In our own age, many great scientists have openly embraced faith. Francis Collins, who led the Human Genome Project, describes DNA as the language in which God wrote creation. He sees no contradiction between sequencing genes and worshiping the Creator. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, a French Jesuit and paleontologist, envisioned evolution as a spiritual journey, humanity slowly evolving toward a divine destiny. For him, science did not diminish faith, it deepened it. These figures remind us that science and religion are not always two camps at war. Sometimes, they live in the same mind, in the same heart. Separate but complementary others argue for a careful truce. Stephen Jay Gould, the evolutionary biologist, proposed that science and religion occupy non-overlapping magisteria. Science asks how the universe works. Religion asks why it exists. Each has authority, but in separate realms. It was an elegant idea, but not without critics. Could humanity really accept two separate truths? Wouldn't the boundaries blur? What happens when questions of how and why overlap? Working together beyond theory, faith, and reason sometimes join forces in practice. On issues like climate change, medical ethics, and artificial intelligence, science provides knowledge while religion offers moral guidance. One asks what is possible, the other asks what is right. Together they confront not only questions of fact, but questions of value. Could it be that the greatest challenges of our future, disease, technology, the fate of the planet, will require faith and reason to work side by side, harmony or illusion? Attempts at reconciliation remind us that the struggle between faith and reason is not always war. Sometimes it is dialogue. Sometimes it is even a partnership. But harmony has never been universal. For every bridge built, another argument erupts. Even today, in classrooms, in politics, and in personal lives, the struggle continues. And so we turn to our final chapter, not to the past, but to the present. Chapter 7. Where the struggle continues. For 2,000 years, faith and reason have shaped civilizations, inspired revolutions, and redefined truth. But the struggle is not over. It is not a story locked in the past. It is unfolding around us right now. From classrooms to courtrooms, from parliaments to personal lives, the tension between science and religion continues to shape our world. If centuries of debate have not ended the struggle, what makes us think it will end now? Creationism versus evolution. Even today, Darwin's theory remains contested. In the United States, some schools face pressure to teach creationism, or its modern cousin, intelligent design, alongside evolution. Supporters argue that life is too complex to have emerged by chance. They insist a guiding intelligence must be at work. Scientists counter that intelligent design is not science at all, but theology disguised as evidence. The fossils, DNA, and observable adaptations of species still overwhelmingly confirm evolution. So why does the argument persist? Because it is not only about biology. It is about authority, about whether truth is to be decided by evidence or by scripture. Atheism versus fundamentalism. In recent decades, the divide has sharpened. Outspoken atheists, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, argue that religion is not only false, but dangerous. They see faith as superstition that holds back human progress. On the other side, religious fundamentalists accuse science of arrogance, of erasing God, of leaving humanity adrift without meaning. When both sides see the other as a threat, can dialogue survive? Morality and meaning. The struggle is not only about origins, it is about morality. Science can explain how the universe works, but not why we should act justly or why life has value. Religion provides moral codes, purpose, and meaning. Yet critics argue morality can exist without faith, built instead on reason, empathy, and shared humanity. If faith is not needed for morality, what role remains for religion? Faith and reason in modern life. The clash plays out in culture and politics. In debates over reproductive rights, climate change, artificial intelligence, and bioethics, science and religion often stand on opposite sides, and yet many live in both worlds. A scientist may analyze DNA in a lab and pray in a church on Sunday. A student may learn evolution in class and recite scripture at night. For them, the struggle is not a battle to win, but a tension to live with. Where faith and reason continue to clash, they also continue to define us. This struggle is not only about facts or beliefs, it is about identity, culture, and the meaning of truth itself. And perhaps the greatest lesson is this: the struggle is not ending. It is becoming the story of our age. Conclusion: the endless struggle. For more than 2,000 years, faith and reason have wrestled with one another. From the philosophers of ancient Greece to the monasteries of the Middle Ages, from Galileo's telescope to Darwin's finches, to the frontiers of modern physics and artificial intelligence, this struggle has shaped civilizations, challenged minds, and defined generations. What reason offers? Reason explains the how. It reveals the laws of motion, the age of the stars, the structure of DNA. It gives us medicine, technology, and the power to shape the world. But reason alone cannot tell us why the world exists, or what we should do with the knowledge we gain. What faith holds, faith seeks the why. It offers meaning, purpose, and hope. It gives comfort in suffering and inspires courage in the face of the unknown. Yet faith, without reason, risks becoming blind, unquestioned, unquestionable, and easily abused. The balance. The struggle between faith and reason endures because both are incomplete. Knowledge without meaning is empty. Belief without evidence is fragile. Humanity stands in between, yearning for understanding, longing for purpose. The human journey. In the end, the epic struggle is not only about the universe, it is about us. We are creatures who measure the stars, and yet search the heavens for God. We split the atom and yet ask what is good. We look through microscopes and telescopes and yet seek meaning in silence and prayer. Perhaps the true story is not faith versus reason, but faith and reason, forever entwined in the human journey. Closing reflection. The struggle will not end. It will change, evolve, and take new forms. But maybe that is the point. Maybe the tension between faith and reason is what drives us, pushing us to question, to discover, to imagine. Faith asks, why are we here? Reason asks, how does it all work? And together, they lead us ever onward, toward truth, toward wonder, and toward the mystery of existence itself. This is the endless struggle between faith and reason. That completes this documentary entitled Faith and Reason, the epic struggle between science and religion. Thank you for watching.